I mean, Silicon Valley, I wrote a big book on Silicon Valley.
Yeah, I know.
Because, okay, I take a little detour before I answer your question. But your question is interesting, so I don't want to lose it.
Yeah.
I wrote a big book, which now the new edition is like 700 pages on the history of Silicon Valley. One day, my friend Arun told me, why don't we write a book on Silicon Valley? And I said, that's a boring idea. And then I started thinking about it. And all the history of Silicon Valley obviously missed something because the starting point, you know, if you go back to 1950, even 1960, even 1970, the microprocessor is invented in 71. So, and you ask anybody in New York what is special about the Bay Area, they would never answer technology. There's no way. Okay, so the technology, so the money was in London and New York. The brains, the great scientists were all on the East Coast in Europe. Nobel Prize winners, all East Coast and Europe. The big electronic companies, IBM, General Motors, AT&T, you name it, all the great inventions, East Coast and Europe, Philips, Siemens, and so on. So the computer was invented in Cambridge. The transistor was invented in New Jersey. The internet was set up originally in Boston. And California doesn't enter the picture. I think by 1960, they had the whole of California had 2 Nobel Prize winners, something like that. So what was special about the Bay Area? If you ask somebody in New York, they will tell you, oh, it's a place for crazy artists and crazy musicians, crazy philosophers, crazy politicians. That's what the Bay Area was famous for.
Oh, interesting.
So if you want to write a history of Silicon Valley, you have to write a cultural history of the Bay Area. Then everything makes sense suddenly. You know, suddenly it makes sense that the technology comes to the Bay Area by accident because of the Cold War, before that, because World War II, but then the Cold War is really. And the Bay Area hijacks technology, totally hijacks it, you know. I track back when the Unix operating system came to the Bay Area. It became the first open source repository, and the news groups of the Unix operating system became the equivalent of social media, where people were exchanging news about crazy rock concert. Later there's a rave there's a party in the basement and so on. And people just were thinking different. It was so easy to come up with the Apple computer here. So easy. 1970, I have a picture of Zero Spark emitting. Those crazy people, you know them. They all look like hippies, long hair. They're sitting on the floor. Those people in 1970 were discussing, I want a computer on a desk. Now focus. 1970, a computer was as big as a 3-story building in a city. It was gigantic. It was an incredibly stupid idea. I want a computer on a desk. And you know for what? Schools. They wanted to give it to school children. It was totally crazy. Now IBM on the East Coast or Philips in Europe, they had the engineers, the money, everything to do this. But they didn't have the crazy idea to start with. Okay, so somebody had the crazy idea. I'm not a fan of Steve Jobs, as you probably know, but in 1995, I saw recently an interview, it's on YouTube, where they asked him about the Macintosh. And he says the reason the Macintosh was such a great machine is because of artists and musicians. It doesn't say it's because of my chief engineer.
Very, very good. Very interesting.
That's always been so important. The idea of the garage.
Can I just interrupt for a second to ask you, because this is super interesting. That is the crazy ideas, the artists, the musicians, the philosophers that are behind this question. Why is it like in Europe? We've always had great artists and musicians and philosophers. Why didn't we manage to get something like Silicon Valley here? So it must be a combination of that and something else, maybe. Or why we didn't do the same here?
Well, that's a very good question. Of course, it's a very good question also from somebody in New York. The point is that the Bay Area didn't have the greatest; it had the craziest.
The
So,
craziest.
if you ask me
Yeah.
who's the greatest painter of the Bay Area, I have no idea. I don't think there is one that I want to see.
The
But the real thing,
craziest.
John Cage learned from somebody named Harry Cowell, who was here in San Francisco. Harry Cowell was all about using noise and using random events to make music.
Yeah.
So it was crazy. Now, John Cage moves to the East Coast and becomes sort of institutionalized. It becomes a movement. It becomes a school. So Europe is about the museums. It's about all the
Ah,
ism. You have impressionism and
yeah.
futurism, which are great. They're very important in the history of culture. But I think it's different from the Bay Area, where you almost want to be poor and marginalized and misunderstood. It's almost a goal,
I
So,
love this. I really love this
so
perspective. I mean, it is really the out of the box, the garage thing. Let's have the minimum possible. Let's just
yeah. So
focus on the crazy ideas.
yeah, if somebody asks you who was the greatest hippie, I have no idea. They were hippies. It was a way of living. It wasn't about I'm the greatest. I'm going to give a talk about the hippiedom.
Yeah.
Hippism doesn't exist. And the Burning Man Festival now is becoming a little institutionalized. But that's another thing that started because it started on the beach in San Francisco. They kicked them out of the beach. And my friend John Law offered, how about you come with us to the desert? We do it in the desert. And he said,
Yeah.
who is the greatest Burning Man person? It doesn't exist. I mean, it's not about, you know what I mean? It's so anarchic. It's just a feeling.
So it's
And
not about also the individual persons necessarily. It's more about the style of life, lifestyle almost.
yeah, it's many things. It's a mindset. We keep saying Silicon
Mindset.
Valley is a mindset. Yeah, the Bay Area was a mindset.
This is
That's
very,
where it
very
started.
interesting because this question of what is the secret of Silicon Valley, so many people around the planet are
Yeah,
are
and
wondering
I
about it.
also think, one component that is important is also the role of the government. Now,
Uh-huh.
the government is very powerful on the East Coast, very powerful in Europe, but was very weak in California. So the role of the government is to stay out of the way. And in California, this was easy to achieve. It was easy to be anti-corporate, anti-government, anti-this, anti-that. It was easy. There was no big corporation here. It was easy. So you could,
This is a good point. So you are telling us that in a way, too much structure, too much regulation, too much control can be an obstacle to create something like Silicon Valley at the
okay,
beginning.
so yes, very important. Yes, the answer is yes, but I want to be precise because in my book, I mentioned Japan as another place where they had a lot of creativity and came up with great inventions.
Yeah.
It's number two. They invented a lot of things from the CD, DVD, flash memory, so many hybrid car. Japan is totally different from Silicon Valley. So Silicon Valley is not the only model.
Yeah.
Okay, it's not the only model that works. There are others, and of course,
It's like the umbrella-ness of before.
Yeah. Even China, they keep inviting me to talk about Silicon Valley in China, but they have the exact opposite. Well, they went from starvation to being the number two, maybe number one economy in the world. So there are other models, but you cannot have Silicon Valley without the crazy artists and crazy musicians. That's in a nutshell. That's my 700-page book. That's what I claim. So anyway, so when I do the lasers and the last festival, I'm just part of a history of the Bay Area. You see these things over and over again. And the Bay Area didn't even have computers. In 1963, the first exhibition of computer art was in San Jose, which now is Silicon Valley.
Yeah.
Recently, there's been articles in MIT Technology Review about Xenobots. Well, the first one to have a Xenobot was actually an artist, Carl Sims. Google him.
Wait. What is an Xenobot?
Xenobots. X-E-N-O.
Xenobot. Okay, yeah, Xenobots, yeah.
And there's a lot of engineers that started, building guns, neural networks that make art.
Yeah.
Cool. But it took an artist, Tom White, to use a neural network to make art, take the art and feed it into another neural network to see what the other neural network thinks. And so he claims that he has neural networks that appreciate the art made by other neural networks. So neural net is not AI by machines. It's AI, it's art, AI art for AI machines. You know,
that's interesting.
So,
that's interesting.
So artists are useful to generate this kind of thing.